Hey out there, all you beautiful internet people. Today I'd just like to make a little short video. I know I always say that I want these videos to be short, but then they end up dragging on to at least half an hour. But today I really do just kind of want to make a little short video. I read recently about how the Estonian gaming company, Zaun Collective, behind the video game Disco Elysium, is in some pretty hot water right now, and everything's kind of just gone to shit over there. And I think this scenario and this state of events is extremely funny and says a lot about the nature of the gaming industry at its core. Disco Elysium is a pretentious art house video game akin to something like Kentucky Route Zero. That's what I would most readily compare it to, one of these new video games that tries and pretends as if video games have the capacity to be high art on the level of a Dostoevsky novel or something. Disco Elysium is effectively baby's first guide to communism that attempts to initiate the average G Fuel chugging gamer into kind of a political state of mind. And it's, like I said, an extremely pretentious, try-hard, ideologically dense game that just hammers all this shit into your head. It's like, here's the Union. Is the Union good? Hey, here's the old communist revolutionary. Is the old communist revolutionary good or bad? Do you arrest him, or do you give him a nice warm handshake? Hey, here's your psyche, bitch. Here's all the aspects of your psyche that you've kept repressed, man. Doesn't this make you think? Right, so it's basically like that, trying to cram all these various political ideologies and economic schools of thought into basically what amounts to a 5-hour slog where you trek through this fictional country and play as this cop character who's got amnesia. When Disco Elysium came out, a lot of people, especially communist wannabes, especially here in America, of course, because we tend to have a lot of communist wannabes here in America, proclaimed that the game was this exciting teaching tool about how great communism is, and oh my gosh, it's so thoughtful, and oh my gosh, it's so brutal and intellectual, and it's so fucking smart. The shit is so fucking smart. After seeing so many people talk about Disco Elysium and so much fucking press and hype over it, I've arrived at the conclusion that to think Disco Elysium is intellectual or has the capacity of thought, you'd really have to be culturally bereft. You'd have to never read a single novel in your entire fucking life, watched any movies except Marvel movies. There's nothing in Disco Elysium that couldn't be communicated more effectively in the form of a movie or a book. And Disco Elysium's existence as a video game is mostly just a gimmick and a poorly disguised attempt to appeal to the gamer crowd who, all things considered, don't actually give a fuck about communism and just want to get back to their G Fuel and Soylent. Right, like the average gamer is not going to become the next Che Guevara. It's just not going to happen. The gamer mindset is too focused on racking up all those sweet, sweet Call of Duty victories. Now, of course, I should include the caveat in this video that I'm neither a communist nor a gamer. I'm a liberal, and I don't like video games, and I don't play video games, and I haven't played Disco Elysium, and I also haven't played The Last of Us, or Among Us, or Fall Guys, or any of these popular video games these days because I'm too busy writing and drawing and reading shit. I don't have time to become a hardcore gamer, but when you get right down to it, I don't think the failure of Zaun Collective, just the massive shit show, where ironically this video game about communism was co-opted by greedy capitalists and all the original employees were kicked out. I don't think this is a failure on the capitalist system's part. I think this is a failure on the gaming industry's part, and it all ties back to how gaming started. You see, gaming by default is not an accessible form of art. It's not accessible to the proletariat, and it was never designed to be. It was designed to make massive companies like Atari and Nintendo a shit ton of money back in the 1980s. Back in the 1980s, programmers for Atari weren't even allowed to credit themselves on the games they fucking designed. So you can pretty much tell where gaming's ethos lies. Gaming is not about artistic expression or individual creativity or passion. It's about getting those sweet, sweet smackaroos and getting everyone their dopamine fix and chugging down that G Fuel. Like, think about it this way, right? If you read a really great novel, like Kerouac's On the Road, or Dostoevsky's Crime and Punishment or something, and you're really inspired by that, you can just use a free word processor online. It's an extremely accessible form of art, writing is. Or you can use a typewriter, or you can just pick up a goddamn ballpoint pen and go to town in a notebook that costs maybe $2 to buy. Writing is a really accessible form of human communication and artistic expression. This can even be applied to something like painting. If you're inspired by a Picasso piece, you can go down to your local art shop, buy a paint kit for like $30 that'll last like 6 months at the least, and try and paint like Picasso, or develop your own style, or whatever floats your boat. Painting is also an extremely accessible form of art because you don't need to take a bunch of courses or sign up for Skillshare or go to college to paint. You can just pick up a goddamn paintbrush, and even if what you paint isn't perfect, even if it isn't masterful on a technical level, hey, you made a painting. You made something cool. You don't need to spend a shit ton of money learning how to do it. In my video on Skinamarink, I pointed out that these days, even something like filmmaking is not all that expensive to get into, given the commodification of digital cameras these days and how easy they are to come across. You can make a movie for like really fucking cheap, provided you have some friends and a location to shoot in and some decent props. You can make a fucking movie for like $100. But there is one form of art that is actually inaccessible to the average person and was always designed to be inaccessible to the average person as a part of its basic structure, and that's the fucking gaming industry. If you're inspired by GTA 5, if you play through all of GTA 5 or Fallout 4 or something and you really like it, you can't make a video game as good as GTA 5 because the fucking server costs and the cost of the engine and all the software and all this fucking shit, in addition to all the technical knowledge about shading and how the engine works and the features of the engine. All this technical mumbo-jumbo is designed to be deliberately obtuse so that only the most deranged nerds possible will ever be able to craft a competent video game on the level of a AAA title like GTA 5. That shit isn't easy to make. It's insanely difficult. And this, going back to Atari and Nintendo, is by design. Atari and Nintendo, back in the 1980s, made their underlying technology deliberately obtuse so that you couldn't just make the next Mario or whatever, thereby ensuring that they basically have no competition. And when you get right down to it, programming a fucking video game, by its very nature, is just an extremely difficult task, whether or not Atari or Nintendo were involved. So, the more artistically inclined, like the people who are actually passionate about making art and aren't just a bunch of neurotic tech bros, are going to have to sink a ton of time and energy and effort into just learning how a fucking video game engine works before they can even possibly begin to express themselves. And then once they express themselves in an overhyped product like Disco Elysium, it's not going to be any better than it would in just a movie or a book or something that'd be way easier to make. And this is why I think when you get right down to it, gaming and communism are fundamentally incompatible and should never even be mentioned in so much as the same sentence, because gaming, by its very essence, is a decadent, bourgeoisie type of thing. And look, I'm a liberal. I don't care if America's communist tomorrow or if it's capitalist tomorrow. I'm relatively neutral on the whole affair of whatever economic system my country uses. I don't really give a shit. I don't benefit inherently from capitalism, I can't say much, but I don't know how communism would work out. I don't hate communism, but like if you're going to be a self-proclaimed communist and pretend like you give a shit, don't make a video game, because Karl Marx wasn't a fucking gamer. Like, back in the day, there weren't just two painters like there was back with Atari and Nintendo. Gaming is, at its core, a monopolistic, elitist hobby, and before Atari and Nintendo, it was started up by a bunch of white, suburbanite college nerds in California with stuff like Computer Space. That shit isn't accessible to the everyman. People wonder these days, people want to diversify video games. They're like, hey, where's all the gay and black characters? And it's like, in movies, in books, in accessible forms of art that are not only easier to make, but better and cooler and less cringe and not made out of these sterile, bland polygons that completely dilute human expression through a computer algorithm, which isn't the point of art. The more direct a piece of art is, the less steps it takes to channel from your brain to your hand onto paper or film or whatever, the more authentic that human expression is going to be. Video games, by their very nature, don't even effectively communicate human emotion because they're all done through a fucking computer algorithm and a gaming engine. And that's not going to lead to the best human expression or emotions or ideals or pathos. Like, just look at something like Shenmue, it's a fucking embarrassment. I don't really just think adding a bunch of LGBTQ and different races type characters into Fortnite is going to make gaming any more equitable. I think from the start it's a broken system. The average communist argues that capitalism is a broken system where certain groups are given an unfair advantage over other groups from the beginning. Gaming is a lot like that. Gaming is the most corrupt fucking form of art that's ever existed, except maybe NFTs. So if you're a communist, the first thing you'd want to do is burn gaming to the ground and then write a 200,000 word manifesto like a complete badass. This is why the only Soviet video game is Tetris. It's brutal and minimalist and it doesn't have any frills on it. That's what you played back in Soviet fucking Russia. The Russians are just like, hey, build a wall, bitch. I'd really actually be kind of interesting to see where Soviet gaming would have gone if the Soviet Union hadn't dissolved. It might be more interesting than American gaming, to be honest, if we got to see the natural progression from Tetris onwards, because like Tetris is, at its core, I think the only video game that could have existed under Soviet ideals, just this basic green vector computer system where you just drop these fucking blocks down and you better not miss a single line, because that ain't the communist way, bruh. Damn, Tetris goes hard. I mean, I'm not even a fan of Tetris. Like I said, I'm not a gamer, but it makes sense that that's the only Soviet game out there. You absolutely would not see a game like Disco Elysium in Soviet Russia. Disco Elysium is decadent as fuck, and in recent years, it's become commodified to hell. You can buy a fucking Kim Kitsuragi jacket and a Harry Dubois fucking mug and a Klaus J mahogany sweater that's bourgeoisie as hell. What the fuck kind of hypocrisy is this? And you can say, oh, there's no ethical consumption under capitalism, everything's going to be commodified. Like, not everything's commodified, right? The Revolutionary Catechism, on average, is not commodified to the same extent that Disco Elysium has been commodified. You're not going to see the Revolutionary Catechism as a fucking video game adaptation where it's like, ooh, check out this hot new merch here. Boy, oh boy, this hot new merch. No, like the Revolutionary Catechism at its core is a text born out of eating snow and dirt and living in the 30-degree below tundra. And that's some communist shit, and I really don't get who doesn't understand that. Probably these fucking fake socialists like Hassan. Hassan probably plays Disco Elysium and goes, "Oh my shit, bros, this shit is so profound. Yes, communist brethren, let us build a mighty communist utopia." This is also why popular urban legends about old video games that are creepy just don't fucking work, like Five Nights at Freddy or The Walden Files or Whatever Happened to Agent Small or the like. Not because necessarily that's a bad idea. It would be cool if there were old video games that were obscure and creepy, but there just fucking aren't. Back in the 1980s, when Atari and Nintendo completely dominated the market, there wasn't a such thing as an indie game. The concept literally did not exist. Nobody thought, wow, I can make a video game. I'm gonna make a video game this weekend. They were like, no, a video game is something you pop into your Atari toaster and it's given to you officially licensed from the Atari company. So something like Whatever Happened to Agent Small just wouldn't exist in the parameter of time it's said to exist. And that's why I think urban legends revolving around creepy movies or creepy books is a lot more captivating and compelling to me than stuff about creepy video games. Because I just know in the back of my head, like, no, nobody in fucking 1991 would have had the budget or resources necessary to make an entire bootleg game for the Nintendo. Catastrophe Crow just couldn't fucking exist. Lethal Omen just couldn't fucking exist. And the fact that everyone feels the need to press a video game element into their ARG or web series or whatever is a fucking moth. Just the fact that every fucking ARG just crams in a video game for no fucking reason, when an ARG, by its very nature, is an extremely interesting multimedia project that it can incorporate, like, paintings and comics and all kinds of cool shit. It just seems like everyone just turns to video games because their minds are so fucking clogged that they've never stopped to consider, oh wait, there are other mediums of communication out there besides video games. Who'da thunk? That's why I think the only creepy video game urban legend that actually works is Polybius, because the US government would actually have had enough money and resources back in the 1980s to construct a rudimentary video game. And I do think the name Sinneslushing, being German and being set in the 80s when Germany was still divided between East and West Berlin, it does have a kind of Cold War era intrigue behind it, and I like that. I'll give Polybius props. It's the only genuinely well-constructed, thought-out gaming urban legend out there. The rest are fucking crap. Anyway, all this is to say, like, when you get right down to it, gaming and communism just are incompatible. And that's what ultimately led to Zaum Collective's demise, that you're trying to build this co-worker environment of, like, equity and fair trade and ethical practices and all this commie shit on top of an industry that's just poisoned by capitalist decadence from top to bottom. Again, I'm not saying that's a bad thing. I don't really care either way, but, like, if you're gonna be a big capitalist pig and you're gonna make all this merch and shit and make it a big franchise that's just like GTA or The Last of Us or whatever, the very least you could do is just be honest about it instead of pretending like you're this grassroots commie collective, like you're the next fucking Leon Trotsky up there. Yeah, right, this is the next generation of communists. Yeah, fat fucking chance if they have to resort to educating people via a fucking video game. Why not just write a fucking manifesto? Pick up a book. Hey, have you heard of this invention called the printing press? It's got a bit more potential for the spread of ideas than Unreal Engine. I know, right? Crazy. Hey, have you heard of this invention called the camera? It's a little more important than the Steam store. Anyway, I just think what happened to Zaum is really fucking funny, and just a great example of how gaming is cringe, yo. Gaming is cringe to the max. It doesn't get more cringe than gaming. It's just full of a bunch of hypocrites who are like, oh, we're gonna make gaming so diverse and thought-provoking, and gaming is real art. Video games are real art, bro. They're so deep. And then it's just like this tacky crap. This kitschy schlock. I don't know, something about that is just like deeply fucking hilarious to me. And I love to see gamers fall apart as their worldview just unravels like a big delicious bowl of spaghetti. It's truly beautiful, the times in which we live. Anyway, that's it for today's video. Sayonara, suckers.